Johnny Mac, joined by Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com, both the podcast and the website. Always fun when Andrew joins us. Just a couple things we've already been talking about today, and I need your slant on it. Jason Kelsey, yesterday on his New Heights podcast, really went to bat for Nick Sirianni. There's taking your coaches back. They're saying the right things. There's not stepping out of your lane. And then there's really endorsing. And that was just my take yesterday. Tell me if you agree or disagree that he went above and beyond to sing the praises of Nick Sirianni. Am I making too big a deal out of this?
No, I mean, that sort of echoes what we heard at Locker Cleanout from Fletcher Cox, from Jason Kelsey, and some of the other key veterans. I think there's something to be said for that, Jody. Obviously, a lot of folks ask, what does Nick Sirianni do? Well, Jason Kelsey outlined that very well in just a brief statement. There's a lot of things that he does behind the scenes to get a lot of buy-in. And there's a lot of guys that, I mean, look, the season went off the rails, but never once, at least from my vantage point, did I ever chalk that up as guys quitting or a loss of just a loss of confidence in the head coach. I think that it was just an aberration of things that sort of just snowballed, but I think that you saw guys playing hard for their head coach, and that's exactly why.
All right, Andrew, you are plugged into the draft. You're one of the best when it comes to the draft. The Senior Bowl is going on right now. Your buddy and our buddy Jeff Mosher's down there from Inside the Birds. Boy, I look at this draft and I say to myself, the Eagles are picking 22nd, and Daniel Jeremiah just came out with his Spurs top 50 list, and there's a lot of stinking offensive tackles in the top 20. I'm almost at the point where I'm going to guarantee the Eagles are going to take an offensive tackle number 22.
Yeah,
because you're going to get value because there's so many of them. Somebody's going to get pushed down. It's always about the individual prospect, but there's so many big-time offensive tackle prospects. Lane Johnson's going to be 34. It's very early, but let's kick it off with Andrew DiCecco. Eagles tackle makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you mentioned Lane Johnson, and he's been in contact with Tyler Guyton, who is an Oklahoma product, and he is somebody that I have sort of filed away as somebody to consider at 22, given Lane Johnson's age, and also you just don't know. I mean, he could retire at any time, right? I mean, he's someone who I believe it was just a couple of years ago that said, I only want to play for a handful of years.
Yeah, he did say after this season, he's coming back. So I'm not worried about it this year.
No, not for this year.
You want to
have someone in place that can kind of learn under him and be able to develop so that when you're plugging him in the year after, he's ready to go. Another player that I look at 22 is Quinion Mitchell.
Hold on. Time out, Philadelphia. I got to jump in here. Are both of you guys telling me that in a year where the Eagles need a center or a guard, depending on what Kelsey does, depending on whether you move him or not, a center or guard, a defensive tackle if Fletcher Cox is not coming back and is going to be elsewhere, a defensive end because, oh, by the way, the first-round draft pick you took at number 30 didn't do diddly squat the entire year, and you need depth at that position. Linebacker, safety, quarterback, all bigger needs than tackle, which you have Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata. The guy's going to sit on the bench. You're going to use your first-round draft pick on a guy who's never going to get in a game. Are you too nuts?
Well, hold on. The second player, what I was going to say is Quinion Mitchell.
I knew you were going there.
The corner from Toledo. I mean, prototypical size, 6 foot, 196. Physical, and a lot of questions he's going to have to ask, and he has checked those boxes this week in Mobile from all accounts. Being a MAC player, you wonder how you're going to size up the competition there and go against higher caliber players. And I think that he's answered that, and you can see that on the clips floating around on social media. He's somebody that when you look at Darius Slay, look at James Bradbury, outside of Keely Ringo, they really don't have any player that you can count on as being a building block as far as the cornerback position. So I think you have to consider that there. Jody, you mentioned center and guard. You rattled that off early. I mean, they would have to be awfully special to take either of those positions in the first round.
Plus they have, look, they think Cam Jurgens is going to be the long-term center. They think Tyler Steen's going to be a guard. So they have sort of pieces in place. They have to develop them. There's no guarantees, but they do have some pieces in place at those particular positions, young pieces. And by the way, corner. But I look at it this way. First of all, we know Howie's mentality. But if you go in the grocery store and you see, well, this is stocked. Yeah, we got and this is brand name, whatever you like, and it's stocked well. Versus you go over to the other thing and maybe there's a lonely piece of a lonely product sitting by itself, kind of cornerback. So if you sit there, and I don't believe somebody like Quignon is going to be there because he's going to get pushed up the board because no corners, and the tackles, they're all over the place and they're going to get pushed down the board. And there's where that value meets with Howie Roseman. And he's going to default to offensive line because you have value in a bunch of guys.
That's where my thinking is.
Early.
Yeah. I mean, it's still very early, but I sort of see it the way that you're saying it, John, as far as Quinion Mitchell. It's arguably one of the most impressive players.
Who's the second best corner in this draft? And where's he going to go?
I think
Terry Arnold
is going to be the number one guy.
Kool-Aid industry. Yeah, I mean, there are players that are going to be there, but I think Quinion Mitchell is really elevating his stock in Mobile. So we're to the point where he may very well not even be available at 22. Therian Arnold is a player that I like a lot from Alabama. He also should garner some consideration, but they need to do something with that defensive backfield. There's actually a couple of safeties that I like in the second round. And a linebacker, by the way.
I should have mentioned Arnold, but there's not compared to. I'm stunned how many names when I pulled up Daniel's list. There's like 8 tackles in the top 20. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and to me, I look at Tyler Guyton right off the bat, having that chemistry with Lane Johnson, playing it out at Oklahoma. I should say, I feel like he has the measurables, and that's kind of right around where I envision him slotting in. So, I mean, that would make sense, John. I mean, we'll have to see, but they certainly need to address the defensive backfield in a big way this offseason as well.
I do like Ringo, though, as I think he showed a lot of, and he wasn't great in training camp, and maybe he's just one of those guys who's a game time player, not a practice player. But I do look at him and say, all right, he showed me that he's got a chance to develop into something.
But I don't know that you want to go into the season kind of like like they did with Nakobe Dean, thinking we have a plug and play guy here.
But they're going to keep Slay. Slay's going to be back. I think they have to make a difficult decision, eat some money with Bradbury, unfortunately, because I love Bradbury personally. But
yeah, I do too, and so does Jody.
I love him as a player, and then he had the season he had.
He's a great guy, man.
And you just,
he is.
You got to be genuine to yourself, and you got to say the guy fell off the cliff, and you have to deal accordingly, even if you love him as a guy. And I did love him as a player, but he had such a regression. Yeah, I think quarterback, I think safety, I think defensive line will all come before tackle. I'm sorry.
But they're not going to reach. This isn't a good edge class by all accounts, and I think that positional value
was Nolan Smith a reach.
No, because there were many that were speaking that was tremendous value. Me being one of them. Now he did have,
and then they had the season. So I'm not asking you what you thought a year ago. I'm asking you now.
Well,
with the result
you can't give up on Nolan Smith.
I think one, you have to acknowledge that there are going to be growing pains with young players. Everybody progresses at a different level. But at the time, I thought that was a home run. And going through my whole extensive pre-draft evaluation process, I really like what Nolan Smith can bring. And I think it would be foolish to turn the page on a player like that after just one season. We'll have to see how he does against a competent defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio and how he's going to be utilized.
All right. So let me ask both of you guys, how does he fit his game? And you're hoping there's still growth to it, but his game, the way he plays the game, how does he fit in the Fangio system? I know it's very similar to the one that they ran this year, but Vic does things a little bit differently. Is he a better fit? Is it, hey, we're going to do it the exact same way again? Or is it, yeah, this isn't even going to be as good as it was, and it wasn't damn near good enough last year?
Yeah, no, he's got to get stronger. He's got to develop his play strength, no doubt about it. But he's a pass rusher. I know he cross-trained a little bit at linebacker last year, but that's not what he is. You drafted him to be a pass rusher. I think you need to see that through. He needs to do some things developmentally on his end this offseason to be able to combat some of the offensive tackles that he's going to be going against. But we'll have to see. That's what they drafted him to be, and that's what I think he'll be long term in this defense.
Andrew, personnel-wise, one of the first things you're taught is don't scout the helmet, because obviously you can get enamored, and some would argue the Eagles got a little bit too enamored with Georgia players, especially early in the process. Can you scout names, though? I mean, this is a genetics league. I heard somebody say that last year, and now, John Alt's kid is out there. There's another McCaffrey coming up.
Luke McCaffrey from Rice. He's a player that I wrote about him. And you look at the Eagles needing a number 3 receiver. Kellen Moore uses a number 3 receiver.
Slot guy. I see McCaffrey, and I'm like, I might take him.
He's good. He's very good. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, good body control, work in the middle of the field. I mean, it fits what the Eagles need. So I mean, I think sometimes, John, you can look at the names, right, and become enamored with it. And
all right, then speaking of names, is there any chance Jeremiah Trotter Jr.?
Yeah, I should have mentioned. That's where I was going. Yeah,
great.
That's where I was going next.
And
well done, Jody.
And I think you have to. I mean, look, if it goes like you and I were talking about this earlier this week, Jody, I don't just think that Jeffrey Lurie is going to tell Howie, we got to get players in here. I think Vic Fangio is saying, look, I need capable linebackers and capable safeties, two of the most crucial components to my defense, to be able to run it effectively and operate at maximum capacity. So with that being said, I think you look at the second round, Jeremiah Trotter's name's going to be there. Is that higher than the Eagles would normally reach for a linebacker? Yes, but these are different circumstances. You're going to have to cater and meet the demands to satisfy Vic Fangio. So, I mean, I definitely would do that if I'm the Eagles, because he's a plug-and-play guy and a difference maker, and that's what they need.
Give me 2 or 3 other players you like for the Eagles that fit into what you think, and we don't even know. We know what Vic wants to play defensively. We kind of know what Kellen Moore does from his previous stops, but guys that you think might fit, it doesn't have to be the first round. Could be, as you mentioned, McCaffrey, middle round slot receiver.
Yeah, Edgerrin Cooper, second round linebacker, Texas A&M. Cole Bishop, safety from Utah in the second round. He slots right in there with right where the Eagles will be picking with 2 of their second round picks. Javon Bullard, the safety from Georgia, is another player who's really interesting on the back end. You look at the running back like Dylan Laub. He's a dual threat running back. He's going to be a day 3 guy, but he's a pass catcher. He would fit in tremendously in what Kellen Moore is looking to do offensively and complement whoever they choose to bring in, whether it's a DeAndre Swift or a power running back, whoever. Those are some. I mean, Utah is another safety at the Senior Bowl who I think has done a nice job. You talked about Kool-Aid McKinstry. Kool-Aid McKinstry, right there, is a plug and play guy. At the end of that,
easy
first round.
for headlines too. Kool-Aid
McKinstry. Yeah. Oh yeah, the Eagles got the Kool-Aid McKinstry, something like that.
Drinking the Kool-Aid.
Drinking the Kool-Aid.
That would be where you're going with that. All right. Interesting that the way you described the running back and the interest they may have. What is Kenneth Gainwell's role on this team going to be next year? Is he going to be part of the mix? Is he going to actually have a chance to win the lead spot? Have they given him a shot and ready to move on? What is your read on Gainwell as we head into the offseason?
Your favorite, Jody.
Yeah.
Kenny Gainwell is, to me, and John, jump in, but I feel like he's just a player that's going to continue to hold the same role that he always has. I think that as we've seen over the past few years, the pieces have changed around Kenny Gainwell, but he stayed in the same role, and I would anticipate that being much of the same. Situationally, he's going to be an impact guy, but is he going to be like a 1B to someone's 1A, whoever they bring in? I don't think so. I think he's going to continue to be a a third down change-up runner, dependable guy that they can count on in 2 and 4 minute offenses, and not much more than that.
Big Dom was on the sidelines yesterday. I don't know if you talked to Jeff and Adam Kaplan, who are down there. Howie and Nick haven't shown up. It's weird that Dom is there, but they aren't. What do you think's going on with the Eagles? They have too much to do up here?
Well, that's what it's kind of weird because in past years, you're starting to see less and less representation at the All-Star events.
I told Jody that yesterday. It's happened. It started with Sean McVay and Les Snead, but go ahead.
And that's true. And I think right now you're seeing teams that are more apt, their thought process may be that I can get more work done away from here. You can send a few different representatives there to scout it. And look, the Eagles have they have a lot more important things to do right now. Let's face it, filling out a coaching staff, figuring out what the heck happened, how they're going to take the next step forward. And I think having a few boots on the ground over there is going to be adequate enough. They're going to report back, of course, with all the data and things that they've been able to divulge down in Mobile. And while you have Howie and Nick and Brass back at the headquarters.
And maybe it's because I come from a scouting background. And in my DNA is both being in charge and dictating and using other people's information and also getting yourself, because my father was both a general manager and a scout for 25 years. Yeah, I want to see stuff with my own eyes. I'm sorry. As much as I trust my scouts, I have to believe in my scouts, my organization. I want a firsthand look. That's the way I would handle it if I were Howie Roseman. Now, oh my God, we got to make sure we're handling the wide receiver coach position. No, more important, who's going to be your second round draft pick for me than.
Oh, sure. But that if there is anything where there's a player that really jumps out, maybe like, in past years, Juan Thornhill really stood out, and Tim Houck actually went to Virginia to put him through his pro day.
I love Tim Houck.
Tim Houck, one of the biggest hitters that I've seen play. Titus Howard, Jody and John, I'm sure you guys remember. He was a prospect the Eagles were very enamored with. I reported that he came to Philly on a top 30 visit. Jeff Stoutland went to Alabama State to put him through his workout. So if there is interest, there will be, they'll find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
And do some.
You want to know something? I'm looking for this on Bleeding Green Nation. On Inside the Birds and/or Sports Illustrated. How many guys did the Eagles have in last year for their visits? And how many ended up as Eagles? And how many ended up as players? And how many ended up as Drek? That'd be a good article for one of you two guys to do. Go ahead, feel free to fight over it. Going back and reviewing who showed up for the visits last year and what they actually did. Because I just remember, I couldn't even give you the names, but going, really? Okay. That sounds like an idea. What the hell are they thinking there? And shame on me, I don't remember what they are, but that'd be an interesting way to do some 2020 hindsight look back on it, since you're saying that is, in your eyes, Andrew, a kind of tip of the cap as to what they would be doing.
Yeah, I mean, you only get so many of those. So the fact that if you're going to burn one, for lack of a better term, on a player, you're obviously showing that you are intrigued and you want to get a closer look in that one-on-one, walk them through the facility, give them, put them through the, that one-on-one tutorial and get to know them a little bit. That's, you don't just do that to, as a smoke screen or to throw a team off, whatever it is. You do that because there's genuine interest.
I would say, though, sometimes meetings can be negatives in the fact that you meet with somebody and you're ruling them out because the meeting didn't go the way they
exactly.
So I think the assumption is when fans see, oh, the Eagles met with so-and-so, it's always positive. It's not necessarily positive.
No,
it can also go in a negative direction. So I think people have to keep that in mind. Jody and I were talking about, I couldn't remember. It's Jeff Hapley.
Jersey guy.
Yeah. Boston College coach, is going to be the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Thamel from ESPN mentioned, we were talking about, I was saying, a lot of college coaches looking to get out of college because of how difficult it's become. And the quote he got was he wants to go coach football again in a league that is all about football. College coaching has become fundraising, NIL, recruiting your own team and transfers. There's no time to coach football anymore. That's sort of the mentality. Now, my question to you, as somebody who does this all the time, personnel, how difficult does it make it, or does it make it more difficult when you have guys hopping from program to program every year? And obviously, if you're at Alabama, you got a better supporting cast than if you go play at Toledo or somewhere like that. And you see guys transferring all over the place. Does that make it more difficult?
Yeah, not only players, but coaches. I mean, there's many instances, John, that when I've reached out to coaches, looking closer at a specific position, and you realize that, oh, they're at this school now, or they're an assistant head coach at this program. I mean, lack of continuity. I mean, to me, continuity, I should say, is one of the more crucial elements to a successful stabilizing situation. And you don't really see a lot of that in college football, especially in recent years. And that's where I see your point, where I think it really does impact and muddy the waters, I would say, in terms of product and sustainability.
So let's take it to an individual level. Great point, both you and John making about players just up and going. Basically, what it comes down to in college these days is you're a free agent every year. There's no long-term contracts. You go, you change, you move, you do whatever the hell you want. You're evaluating two players, same position. The tape comes back the same. The grade comes back the same. One guy stayed put for 4 years and played for that university the entire time. The other guy transferred twice, played for 3 different teams in 4 years. Which player are you looking at? If that's a tie-breaking thing in your mind, someone who did take the next best offer, was willing to change, relearn, there's an upside to it too, changing teams, or the guy who was loyal and said, I committed to go to this university. I'm staying right here, and not knowing all the NIL details. They upped his payment every single year. Loyalty versus the ability to move around and prove yourself in other positions. What do you think is a more valuable tool?
Yeah, there's obviously two sides to it. So I think there's an appeal to somebody who does bounce around and go to different programs, because you're showing an ability to learn different systems, which obviously when you're looking at translating to the pro level, that's very appealing. But there's also something to be said for loyalty and sticking with the program and continuity and getting just really owning your role and being dedicated to a program. And I think that also shows a lot of dedication, which is also something that many coaches look for in the evaluation process. So that, to me, I'm looking at the guy who stays somewhere for all 4 years and stays committed to a program and works through growing pains and, just has to fight through challenges.
So would I.
Yeah. And I'm a big continuity guy. So we want continuity on a different level, but I haven't talked about it with you. Continuity on the coaching level here in Philadelphia. Your overall thoughts of the way Jeffrey Lurie has handled this and set up this situation, because look, if they win, everything's fine. But if they struggle a little bit, the questions are going to pop up pretty quickly. And we know how many people cover this team on a daily basis, how many people talk about this team on a daily basis. Has Jeff Lurie set up Nick Sirianni to fail?
I think so. This is a really difficult situation for Nick. And I do think that it was a knee-jerk reaction to completely overhaul the coaching staff. When they appointed Brian Johnson to OC, the school of thought should have always been that this is going to be a 2-year project, for lack of a better term, right? You got to give coaches a chance to develop. And when you don't do that, I think that it's totally malpractice, because now you're seeing him getting league-wide interest. Most recently, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the offensive coordinator position. Sean Desai's gotten a couple of bites. Now, I didn't think Sean did a great job, and I think that the Eagles appointed 2 guys who were really new to their role on a team that was ready for a Super Bowl. So I don't think that either of them were ready to run the show. But I think the optics are bad, to kind of just get rid of both of those guys. When you stood behind them, you were so sure that these were the ones to direct you to the promised land. And now Nick Sirianni has to take a step back and take on a CEO managerial delegation type of role. Doesn't have a whole lot of say as to what his coordinators are going to do now. So your fate more or less lies in their hands, and you're powerless to a degree. So it's really tough if you're Nick Sirianni. You're sort of painted into a corner. And it's kind of tough. Look, you have two big personalities that just came in. Well, Kellen Moore, I'm not so sure about, but Vic Fangio, certainly. And I think the more personalities you add in there, you wonder if Nick Sirianni is going to feel comfortable jumping in, if he's going to get overridden in certain regards. So, I mean, it just right now seems like it's a really murky situation to navigate if you're Nick. And if it goes sideways early, I mean, man, that's going to be – it could be ugly.
All right, John just reminded me earlier in the show about the Matt Patricia info leaking out because the Eagles accidentally put it on their website that he was part of their staff. I'd completely forgotten about that. That was funny. But a big reason that was, as Emily talked about it, was that Darius Slay and Matt Patricia had the relationship that they did in Detroit, aka not good. But apparently they worked through it, and Matt wasn't in a major position to affect Darius up until he got the play calling responsibilities. Darius is a guy you have to handle with kid gloves. That's just my opinion. And John said just within the last 20 minutes, oh, Darius will be back, which I probably agree with. I'm not as 100% as John is, but if it's thumbs up, thumbs down, yeah, he's going to be here. How are Darius Slay and Nick Fangio going to get along?
Oh, well, that to me is one of the big questions when you look at how certain players are going to respond to an authoritative, strict disciplinarian, as someone put it to me, that the Eagles are getting.
Yeah.
The other two players that I would look at to see how they're going to respond to some pushback are Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, two players that have always been at the head of the class that probably haven't been challenged as much. Now you're going to have a 65-year-old coach that's a no-nonsense type of guy that's going to demand excellence. And that's really the foundation of the defense. And he's going to put a lot of onus on them to be able to carry out his defensive vision. So those two guys and Darius Slay are the three players that I'm really looking to see how they take to some really tough coaching, someone who is a grown-up in the room that's going to demand excellence and be, a strict disciplinarian.
Yeah, I'm Carter and Davis 100% agree. You got to see how that unfolds, and that's the foundation. I think you have to build this defense on those two guys. That's where it's going to start. With Slay, I'm not going to say, because Matt Patricia exists, obviously, I'm not going to say he gets along with everybody, but he gets along with like 99% of the people.
Yeah, he sure does. He sure does.
I don't get this Slay narrative where, because he's loud, he's obnoxious at times, he's very energetic, but everybody loves the guy. I mean, he's a good teammate. Everybody raves about him. He's a team captain.
He's a great dude. We love talking to him.
Great dude.
You sort of equate that. You can't help but equate that, John, to the Matt Patricia in that that's the only thing that you have to really go off of. Like, the one coach who can maybe press some buttons and have you think in a certain way, he might be thinking, hey, I'm 33 years old. I don't need this. I can go somewhere else and thrive. I don't have to deal with, clashing with my DC every day and coming to work with, a certain
and then going back to Vic, I'm more concerned about the Nick Sirianni, Kellen Moore dynamic because the organization knows Vic. Everybody loves Vic in the Eagles organization. Kellen Moore's the outsider coming in to take over Nick Sirianni's baby. So that's sort of that to me, that's wrought with potential hurdles and difficulties. With Vic, like everybody loves Vic. Nick loves Vic. Nick gets along. Howie loves Vic. Jeffrey loves Vic. I think Vic's fine.
But it's one thing to like him when he's coming in a consultant type of role. It's another thing to sort of gauge how he is and be able to digest who he might be as a person when you're working alongside him every day.
I think the big problem is maybe everybody's caught up to the scheme because too many people use it. That's my issue with Vic. But as far as, and I see coming off Miami, and that's why I worry about the younger players. Will he push Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis? Yes. And will they take to that pushing that part of it? Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
You said something really interesting about Kellen Moore, though, and I do think that It's something that bears watching, especially the fact that the Eagles, look, they interviewed him to be their head coach. So, like,
Yeah.
obviously there is interest there, and he's coming in to take over Nick's offense. And if he sees some success and Nick struggles as a whole with situational calls and things like that, I mean, man, Jody's going to be fielding an awful lot of calls about Kellen Moore should he be taken over.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. You can follow him on X. Pretty simple, at Andrew DiCecco, DiCecco, and read him on InsideTheBirds.com and on their podcast. AD, good stuff as always. We'll get you on in a couple of weeks. Thanks for doing it today.
Pleasure, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Andrew
bud.
DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Bird podcast. All right, McDonald McMullen coming back. What are we going to do? Somebody mentioned it on the stream already. And you know, I'm not going to say it now because you already said it. We're going to finish the show.
Mhm.